Thank you. I'm happy to be here today. So I do lead globally 3 segments for IBM: aviation, hospitality, and travel-related services. So it puts me in a really interesting perspective to see pretty broadly the global trends and what's happening across all of these subsegments of travel. So ATPCO asked me to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and how we see that impacting the future of travel. I'm not going to speak too pie in the sky. I'm going to talk about some things that are happening right now and how we're initially using cognitive capabilities and AI capabilities to really start transforming how we use it across the industry. So, does this picture look familiar? Go back 3 or 4 years. A great film called The Imitation Game. This was Alan Turing in the late 1930s, I guess, who created the first digital computer. So, it was a programmable computer. It was kind of the beginning of the end of World War II. He built an algorithm to crack the German codes that really was the beginning of the end of World War II. Saved thousands and thousands of lives. So this was the kickoff of the digital era. But for the 85 years after that, all computers were programmable computers. A human had to tell the machine what to do. They were driven by algorithms and programmable code. So, whether it was the PC or the mainframe, what have you, they were all programmable systems. Well, now we've entered the cognitive era. So now we have machines and platforms who can learn from the data. They can read the data, they can understand the data, they can learn from that data. So it's really changing the way that platforms are built now. So I'm going to talk just not about robots and not pie-in-the-sky types of use of artificial intelligence that really kind of creep everybody out. I'm going to talk about how we're using cognitive capabilities now to really kind of get our arms around all this data and use this data that's really running the world these days. You've probably seen some of these numbers before, but we really are just scratching the surface. I mean, almost every presentation we've seen here yesterday and today has talked about some aspect of using data. Data standards, data gaps, everything around data. And there's so much that we're not even touching. I mean, really, a very, very small piece of it can't even be used by traditional computers today. It's just going to get worse. So the number of connected devices are going to double over the next 3 years. And those connected devices are all capturing new types of data. Whether it is a Wi-Fi connected TV in your home or your hotel room, whether it's a voice control device in your home or somewhere else that you're using in the public, whether it's sensors on an aircraft, anything like that. They're all collecting new forms of data that most of the systems today don't even know how to use that information. You look at the aircraft data that's being captured now by all the sensors on the new aircraft. You look at all the social media data that we're capturing from all the different social media channels. User-generated data like flyer talk, weather data, and how that impacts every single supply chain in every industry. All important data elements. Most of our systems today can't even use most of that data. As we see that to continue to explode over the next 5 to 10 years, most of the new data that we're capturing is what's called unstructured data. So you have structured data, which is the traditional and transactional data that we're capturing today in our PSS systems and our reservation systems, marketing data, things like that. That is structured data. The programmable systems know how to handle that data. Most of the data explosion we're going to see over the next few years is unstructured data. It's video clips, it's photographs, it's graphical data, it's medical images, it's some of this sensor data that we're capturing and storing and nobody quite knows what to do with. That's where our focus is right now with cognitive. It's really about using these cognitive capabilities to see how we can now finally make use of this data, because it's more than what humans can really make use of today. So we've talked about big data. You've heard that term for many years now. Big no longer describes it. It's unstructured, it's streaming, it's graphic. It's really more than any human can really get their arms around and make use of. That's where cognitive really comes into play. You look at what we can do now with cognitive platforms. It can understand the data. It can look at a video clip and understand the context of that video clip and what's happening in that video clip and make decisions from that and learn from that. And we're doing some really incredible things with just these 3 basic capabilities and how we get our arms around this big data and this unstructured data especially. Cognitive systems have things they're good at, but it doesn't mean we're going to replace humans. Anytime we talk about artificial intelligence, the first thing that pops into people's minds is, oh, jobs, that means replacing jobs. Humans are going away. This application of cognitive capabilities is really about using cognitive to get your arms around this data, make sense of this data, but then put it in a human's hands so the human can make a better decision. So this is really about using these capabilities to bring the data to a human in the context of a decision they're trying to make so they can make a better decision, a better operational decision, a better decision about how to handle a customer issue, things like that. So it really is about bringing people and data together. And that's where we're seeing some of the greatest change. And probably everybody in this room is going through some aspect of digital transformation. And this is where we're seeing the greatest change. It's where we're able to use cognitive capabilities along with all of these new digital channels and digital platforms to really kind of bring the data capabilities and the understanding of this information and put it in the hands of a human employee at the right time in the context of a decision that they're trying to make. Mobile is an important element of this. Mobile is kind of the tip of the spear in making this work for an employee at an airline. So about 4 years ago, we partnered with Apple really to start developing enterprise applications. The airline industry was the first ones that embraced this. We developed lots of great applications in collaboration with Apple and a lot of airlines that we work with. And the reason mobile is important around this is that's how you get this information boiled down to a simple handful of screens that an employee can consume that right at that mobile moment in the context of a decision that they're trying to make. So this quote here from Tim Cook, "We can change the way people work." And that's really what we've been doing. We've been completely redesigning the roles of a lot of airline employees around using a mobile application on a mobile device. They're inherently out running around airports or tarmacs or on and off airplanes. And so it really was about pushing information to them in that moment that they needed that information, or pushing notifications to prompt them to do something. So as we've approached all of our applications and platforms for the travel industry, these were kind of the important elements that we considered. So it really is taking a design thinking process and redesigning these roles of these users and getting the actual user into a design session. It makes a huge difference. So bringing the pilot in, bringing a flight crew member in, or a cabin crew member, bringing a dispatcher in, bringing a ground handler in, bringing a maintenance engineer in, and really kind of rethinking how they do their job and what information they would love to have at their fingertips when they're making a decision and not have to run back to a computer screen or go look it up in a manual. And just having those users in the room and having them think through how they could better use this information, you can then map to the data and the analytics that could be fed to them in real time right there at that moment to make that better decision. So it's about the convergence of mobile, cloud to make this data available across the enterprise, pulling in the data, and then these cognitive capabilities that kind of bring it all together. And then the cognitive capabilities also then allow that interaction between the human and that mobile application to learn from that, learn what they did with that information, and factor that into how that information is collected and analyzed in the background. So some really amazing things going on when you look at the convergence of mobile, data, and cognitive capabilities. So just in the last 4 years, we've created a whole suite of airline applications. And like I said, I don't know what it was at the right time. Airlines were just coming out of their modernization of their core systems, just starting to get their arms around this data. But that was the industry that really embraced this. And we've really done some amazing things by creating this entire portfolio of applications. And you can see across here, that it may be a little too small here, but both from a customer service perspective, from the cabin crew perspective, the flight crew, line maintenance, and operations, we've actually sat down and completely redesigned the roles of these employees and how they do their job. And probably one of the best examples is what we did up at Air Canada. And I host an airline summit every year where we bring in our top 25 airline clients and kind of share ideas and look at global best practices. And we had up on stage an Air Canada pilot, a flight attendant, a ground handler, and an IT person. And they actually had their iPads projected up onto big screens like this, and they actually walked through and demoed how they use this on a daily basis. and how if a flight attendant detects a maintenance issue with an IFE system on board the aircraft, and they're somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, he or she can log that. It sends a notification to the iPad for that ground crew person on the ground in San Francisco, or Vancouver or Toronto, wherever they may be landing next, and they have the equipment waiting at the gate, and they can swap that out in line maintenance and not have to risk delaying the flight or having to pull that aircraft out of service for something else. So it's really amazing how all these applications then start interacting with each other, and how, as we redesigned these roles, we really saw how information could flow between these individuals in a way they never have before. So really some pretty interesting stuff that we've done there. So this is where, like I said, this is where we're really seeing the greatest amount of transformation right now. As airlines are getting through the core part of their digital transformation, they're looking at what they're doing with their applications for their employees. Everybody's kind of gotten over that first and second generation hurdle with their B2C applications, and they're really starting to focus on mobile applications for their employees, looking at how they get their arms around all this data and how they make this data more consumable for their employees. But if you think back to that chart that I showed earlier, this is the only way you really can get your arms around what we used to call big data, and really put it in a form that's usable by your employees. So really cool things happening there. It's probably the next big, it is the next big wave of transformation that we're seeing in the airline industry. There are definitely big steps ahead of hospitality and cruise lines and car rental companies, but those guys are catching up as well. So look at this. Don't be afraid of artificial intelligence. Look at how you can use it to really embrace the data and all the stuff we've talked about this week relative to data. This is how you do it. You've got to understand cognitive computing. You've got to see where it fits on your IT roadmaps and start seeing how you factor that in to how you look at this data, how you analyze this data, and how you push it to your employees. And I'll leave it at that. I will make one little pitch. If you want to know more about this, we have our own internal research organization called the Institute for Business Value. We've done lots of surveys and written lots of white papers about cognitive computing and how it fits into digital transformation and IT roadmaps. You can go to ibm.biz, B-I-Z, and then just click on travel and transportation, and you can see all of our white papers about digital reinvention and how that applies to data and analytics and cognitive computing. Or you can also get most of the links from my Twitter feed. I push them out on a regular basis when we have new white papers published and new surveys that we publish in our research organization. But I'll leave it at that for now, and hope to see you guys afterwards. Thank you.